G'day there, Phil here. If you are in some way invested in the share market or you're thinking about getting invested in the share market, whether it's personally or through your retirement savings funds, then please watch this video because it is 100% for you. It might just save you hundreds of thousands of dollars and possibly even millions of dollars. And as you will find out, this is not at all an exaggeration. Okay, now the reason this topic came up today is that I have a really good mate who I meet with on a regular basis. We've been friends for over 25 years, and every 6 weeks to 2 months, we catch up via Zoom. And in our last call, we got onto the topic of investing, and my friend shared with me that he and his wife have recently invested $300,000 into managed funds. Now, he's invested there for the long term and understands the risks of investing. But I had to ask him what he was actually invested in. So he shared with me which platform he was invested in, and it's a really good quality platform, really well known. And then he shared with me one by one the individual managed funds that he was invested in. All really well known household names, or certainly in the investment world, the financial advice world, really well known names, good quality funds. But I said to him, do you know what sorts of fees you were paying on these funds? And he said, no, actually, I don't know what the fees are on those. And so I said, well, can we have a look? And so we went on to, while we were all there on Zoom, we went on to the platform and we had a look at the fees on each of these funds. And I'll be honest with you, I was quite shocked because certainly during my 20 plus years in the financial planning world, there had been downward pressure on fees. But these fees that he was showing me were really quite high, somewhere between 1.5% and 2% per annum. He was paying in management fees for these fund managers to pick and choose stocks so that they could outperform the market. Now, I said to him, do you realize what impact these kinds of fees are going to have on your returns? And he said, no, I hadn't even thought about it. So I said to him, okay, let me just quickly show you this. And I went to this calculator that we now have on the screen. Now, I like this calculator because it allows you to compare two different fees side by side, but I don't like it because it's basically fixed at 20 years. But I wanted to use this as an example for him. And so what we've got here is the fees that he's paying, 2%, and the potential fees that he could be paying, 0.35%. Now you might ask, well, where did you get those fees from? Well, those are the sorts of fees that you can pay these days in either index funds or exchange traded funds. Now, I'm not going to go into exactly what all those are these days, but if you have a look here, and I pulled up a list here, these are all the index funds and exchange traded funds that you can invest in through the Australian share market. Now, I've brought this up because there is a huge long list here of them. And so you can invest in all sorts of shapes and things. All the things that he was invested in his managed funds, you could be invested in using exchange traded funds or index funds. But the thing that I want to show you here is these are the index tracking funds. Now, the index tracking funds, you can see this one here has a management fee of 0.04%. This one, Smaller Companies Fund, 0.39%. The Australian Top 200 Shares, 0.4%. It goes all the way down. You can see 0.8 is the most expensive one in there, but that's because it's got some borrowing in there. You've got the Technology Fund, 0.48, a 0.09. The Vanguard Australian Shares Fund, 0.1%. All very, very low. And so this is where I just came up with an average, which is probably on the high side of the average there of 0.35%. So you can see there is certainly plenty of funds available to access instead of just going directly with managed funds. So if we come back to this calculator, I want to show you then the impact that this has. So we can see here that the fund that he's in, he's paying 2% fees. So his return, his $300,000 over 20 years would grow into $1.16 million, which sounds really good. Okay, that's all right. But what he will be paying in fees over that time is $520,000. So that's well over, it's about, what, 35%, something like that, a bit more, of his portfolio is going in fees. And if we have a look, of his return has gone in fees. And so if we have a look at the 0.35, so we go back to the returns, if you were invested at a lower fee fund, you can see that the $300,000, the same $300,000, he hasn't had to work harder or do anything differently, has grown to $1.576 million. And the fees that he pays on that is just $104,000, which still sounds like a lot, but it's a whole lot less than $520,000. And as a result of that, he gets to keep significantly more. So that's just a comparison of those fees side by side. Now, as he said to me, he said, but Phil, you're comparing an actively managed fund with professional fund managers who are picking and choosing, which are going to be the best stocks, with an index fund where all the fund managers there do is just track whatever are the top 200 shares on, say, the Australian share market or the top 500 shares on the US market. They're not trying to pick and choose the best ones. They're just picking all of them. And I said, yeah, that's very, very true. But what you've got to understand is that there's been a whole heap of research over the last few years that is proving that the actively managed funds do worse than if you just invest in the index funds. And so I showed him this. This is here. Now, this is by Spiva, which is basically an annual comparison between the actively managed funds and the index funds, so the passively managed funds. So making that direct comparison. And what we see here is that 80%, so this is in Australia, over the last 15 years, 80% of professional fund managers underperformed the top 200 shares index in Australia. So if you just invested in a fund that matched the top 200 shares in Australia, you would have beaten 80% of the professional fund managers that are invested in Australian shares. So picking and choosing shares clearly isn't working, and yet you're paying way more in fees. And that's not just in Australia. If you have a look at the US as well, in fact, they're worse. 93% of fund managers could not outperform a fund that literally just invested in the top 500 shares. So we have to ask ourselves the question at this point, why on earth am I paying professional fund managers extra fees to get me a lower return? Good question. Okay, so what I want to bring you back to now, so that's how we end up differently here, but let's just quickly go back to a bigger picture of this, and I'll try and make this bigger here so we can actually see it. Okay, so what we've got here is this same $300,000, but this time instead of 20 years, we've got it invested over 30 years. And we're not adding anything on an annual basis. We've just invested at $300,000. We've got our 9% return there, and I've put in 1.65%. So that 1.65% is the difference between the 0.35 that you can pay using exchange traded funds and index funds and the 2% that my friend is paying in fees. And let's have a look at the impact of fees in this scenario. So remember, this is the impact of fees. Not necessarily what we've paid in fees, but just the impact, because by taking away money in fees, it's not there to grow. So if we have a look here, we can see that at the end of 30 years, the fund has grown to, now what I'm going to start with actually, if I say 0 fees, because this is the best case scenario, not going to happen, but the best case scenario, that $300,000 with 0 fees would actually grow at 9% to $3.98 million. So almost $4 million. So if we then add our fees in there, so that's our best possible outcome. But if we add in our management fees, 1.65%, you can see what's happened now is the dark blue is, 3.9 million is what we can get. If we can put in the fees here, we can see that potentially what we're now going to get is 2.4 million. So of the 3.9, it's now reduced down to 2.4 million. We've lost $1.5 million because of the impact of fees. So when I said to you earlier that this could save you millions of dollars, I wasn't exaggerating. What we're losing, so we're keeping 2.4, we're losing 1.5. Which is a little bit scary. Now, let's have a look at, well, what would this look like if I also then add in financial advisor fees? So I know that a lot of people using these professional fund managers are using financial advisors. Now, I am in no way talking against financial advisors here. I used to be one. I'm just talking to you about the impact of paying fees to your financial advisor. So let's just say we add $3,000 in there per year for fees. What we can now see is on top of the management fees and the financial advisor fees, the 3.9 million we could have had is now reduced down to 2.1 million, and we're losing 1.8 million as a result of the impact of fees over that time. So it's almost halved, and in fact, the effect of fees is you're losing 46% of your potential return on that portfolio. So pretty scary. So now the last thing that I want to leave you with is, let's just say we had same portfolio, but we're only paying 0.35% in fees. And I'm taking out the financial advisor fee. The same $3.9 million, but now we're getting to keep $3.58 million of it, and we're only paying $394,000 in fees. A significant difference. That is just 9% in fees as opposed to 46%, and we're getting to keep about $1.4 million more than we were previously, which is absolutely huge. Okay, I hope that has made sense. I'm hoping that's inspiring you to go and have a look at what you're paying on fees, whether it's in your personal portfolio or in your super funds. Check out what you're paying in fees, because just 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%, makes a huge difference on your return at the end of the day. All right, as you all know, my mission is to make life-changing, practical financial education accessible for everyone. If this has been of benefit to you, please make sure you share it with other people. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, but I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care.